And just bring your attention back into yourself after having lunch, being outside in the sun. And just notice how you're being supported by the floor in this position. And which parts of you are resting softly into the floor? Where do you make comfortable, soft contact? And can you notice some parts of you that are pressing strongly into the floor? Where do you feel heaviest? And then there are going to be some places that aren't touching the floor at all. So see what your little pressure map is like on your back here for a moment. And how heavy does your head feel? So now, can you roll over onto your tummy? And see, how does it feel in this position? What do you notice? You're probably getting more used to lying in this position now. And just see where you put your head, where you put your arms, where you put your legs. How do you arrange yourself to be as comfortable as you can be right now? And have you learnt anything from all of this time lying on your tummy, doing some FI practice about how to let the floor support you here, to rest into the floor rather than pressing into the floor? And there are parts of you that know this and parts of you that don't know it so well. So in this position, where do you feel heaviest? Where do you feel the most pressure? And how much of you feels a soft, comfortable contact with the floor? And where are the places that aren't touching at all? And how's your breathing different in this position? Where do you sense the movement of your breath? And so if you can start this ATM with your head in the middle, resting on the back of your hands or in your palms, I suppose, it doesn't really matter. So in the middle, with your head in the middle position, and how can you bring your hands into a position that would support your head in a comfortable way? And how does that change the way that you're resting into the floor if your head's in the middle now? How does that distribute your weight? And could you bring your attention to your right heel, the back of your right heel, up in the air there? Well, it's not in the air, but it's further from the floor than your toes. And imagine that somebody could come and press on the back of your heel, just softly. And notice whether your heels are turned out or turned in. So your heels out and your toes in, or your heels in and your toes out. And see, is it possible to have your feet sort of directly back in line with your legs? And see if that feels any different for you, to imagine somebody pressing on the back of your heel if your feet are in this position. If that's uncomfortable, that's fine. Just put your legs wherever they're comfortable. But if it's okay to have your feet in this position, you've just got this sense of somebody pressing on the back of your heel. And then those fingers are going to move a little further up the back of your right leg. And what they're looking for is a solid support. So a line, a place along the back of your calf where it feels like the fingers wouldn't slip off to the right or to the left, but would have a solid ground. So it's the line of your bone. So imagine that this finger could press bit by bit up along the back of your lower leg, finding each time the path where there's the clearest sense of support or resistance, to where it's not going to fall off, you're not going to slip off to the right or the left. And that finger could be pressing fairly firmly. So you get a sense of that downwards pressing. Firm but gentle. And as you let those fingers move up, bit by bit, up towards the back of your knee, you're creating a path, a little track, and go once you get to the back of your knee, can you go down again? Slowly and softly, all the way back towards your right heel. And do it slowly enough that you can sense every point along that path. So those fingers aren't skipping bits, they're finding each little point along the path. And when you get to your right heel again, can you start to move up again towards the back of your right knee, slowly enough. Now, another image that might be useful, that can give you a sense of this, is to imagine a heavy ball resting on the back of your heel, and for that ball to roll slowly towards the back of your right knee. But you need a ball with a bit of weight in it, so you can feel that pressure, the heaviness. And you want to find that path that you've tracked out where the ball's not going to roll off to the inside or the outside of your leg. And it's going to find a path that it can roll on. And just continue a few times up and back between your heel and your knee, slowly enough that you can really get a sense of that. And the next time the ball is up at the back of your knee, leave it there for a moment, and then let the ball continue up along the back of your right thigh, having with the same idea that you're finding where the ball could be supported along the line of your bone, along the line of the ground. And as you sense that weight pressing, rolling up towards your right hip, what can you feel at the front of you? And are there places along that line that are clearer and places that are less clear? As it rolls up towards your right hip, in between those hamstring muscles there, and then back towards your knee again. And when you get to your knee, continue down along that path that you've already tracked out, down to your heel. And maybe you could imagine something even firmer now. So you could imagine a little baby steamroller that can start at your right heel and roll along your lower leg up towards your knee and up towards your right hip. And see if that gives you even more of a sense of that pressing towards the ground, finding the place of support. Now, when you get up towards your right hip, what happens here? Can you continue to go up over your buttock so that you could feel the back of your right hip being pressed towards the floor? And when that happens, when you get to that place where you're pressing the back of your right hip, does something, you feel a response further up? And then come back down, back to the back of your thigh, to the back of your knee, but slowly, so that each time you go along this pathway, it gets a little bit clearer. And then the next time you're back at your heel, just let that rest, but notice if that right leg feels any different now. Okay. So can you bring your left hand out from under your head and just extend it forwards a little bit on the floor? So it's a little straighter and a little further out in front of you. And now could you imagine a ball or some fingers or a steamroller pressing on the back of that left hand, and find where would be a starting place that would feel supportive enough to accept the weight of whatever that is, some pressure from a hand or a heavy ball or a little steamroller. So where would you start that wouldn't roll off? If it's too close to your thumb, it's going to roll off towards that side. If it's too close to your little finger, it's going to fall off that way. So where's that solid starting point at the back of your hand? And from there, could you start to find a track, a pathway towards your right elbow? So you're imagining, where is the line of the bones of your left forearm? And how can you imagine a weight rolling, pressing down along that track from the back of your left hand, slowly towards your left elbow? and then back again to your hand. So this is you don't need to actively do any movements here. You don't need to actively press. This is imagining an external weight, an external pressure. And then when that track is reasonably clear for you, can you extend it a little further beyond your elbow to move towards your left shoulder? And how is this part of you able to support the weight of this imaginary, whichever thing works for you, the heavy ball, the weight of somebody's curious fingers, or a little steamroller. And as that moves along this pathway of your left arm, from the back of your left hand down to your elbow and towards your shoulder, you're just finding that track getting a little clearer and a little clearer. And what happens when you get to your left shoulder, if you think about moving onto your left shoulder blade? Can you sense where the path would continue here? To find that support, to find the ground underneath you. And then let that go. See how that left arm feels now compared to your right arm. And is it feeling different anywhere else? So this whole lesson is done lying in this position. So if you're needing a break at any time, just roll onto your side or onto your back for a rest. And actually this looks like a good time for a rest following there. And you can rest if you're comfortable resting on your belly, do that. Otherwise onto your side or onto your back. And whatever position you're resting in, just notice if you still have a sense of the pathway that's been kind of pressed into those two limbs. And so back onto your belly, rolling onto the front, and have your head in the middle if it's okay to be there, and your left arm extended out in front of you a little bit, and your legs spread a bit apart. So we're going to join up these two pathways. So come back to your heel and have the heavy ball or the fingers or the little steamroller roll up from your right heel, up along the middle of your right lower leg, over the back of your knee, up towards the back of your right hip. And see if you can follow that pathway over your right buttock towards your spine, and just have a little look at where it's going to meet up with that pathway that you've made along your left arm to your left shoulder blade. And see, how could you find a track across the back of your trunk, the back of your pelvis, up your spine. Notice where you cross over to find your left shoulder blade. And when you reach your left shoulder blade, come back down again along that pathway to find the track that came up from your right leg. So we're going to join these two tracks together. And as you do that, with that sense of weight, that sense of rolling pressure, how do you feel yourself adjusting to the floor? You have a sense of yourself flattening out a little bit more into the floor, lengthening a little bit. How much can those ribs give to soften enough to let the pressure, this rolling pressure, move across your back on that diagonal? And you feel yourself adjusting on the floor as you imagine this pressure moving, or this weight moving from point to point. And when you're at your left shoulder blade next time, can you continue all the way along to your left elbow and up to your left hand? And then from your left hand all the way along that pathway to your elbow, to your shoulder blade, across the back of you, feeling how each point of pressure does something at the front of you. We've got this imaginary thing rolling along the back of you that presses you into the floor at each point along that path, and continue all the way down towards your right heel until you get there. And just see, can you sense this pathway now, this track from your right heel through to your left hand? Is that getting clearer for you? So now that we have the pathway, can you imagine a ball sitting on the back of your right heel? And this time, could you lift your right heel a little bit so that you could roll the ball slowly towards your right knee, and then lower your foot again so that the ball can roll back down to your right heel? So now you're going to be very softly, it doesn't need much movement at all. But what you're wanting is to imagine that movement of your leg can roll the ball exactly along that track that you've already mapped out for yourself. So there's support all the way for this ball. So up to your knee and then back to your heel. That's it. And then could you expand that roll? So what could you do the next time the ball's at the back of your right knee to roll the ball up towards your right buttock? So could you find a way to lift your knee a little bit and then down again. Now this can be a really small movement, doesn't need to be big, but as you lift your right leg a little bit, where does where does your weight move to? When you lift your leg, how do you find support in the rest of you to allow that lifting, to let that ball roll all the way to your right hip, and then as you lower your leg again, that the ball rolls all the way down again to your heel. And could you then expand that to roll the ball from your heel to your knee, to your hip, up to the back of your pelvis, and all the way across, slowly, slowly, finding that pathway across to your left shoulder blade. And when the ball reaches your left shoulder blade, can you lift your left shoulder blade to send the ball rolling gently, slowly, but with enough weight that you can feel that movement, that tracking across the back of your trunk towards your right hip and down along the back of your leg, all the way to your right heel. And then do that again. So from your right heel up to your knee, up to the back of your right hip, and across the back of your pelvis, up your spine, across to your left shoulder blade, and continue all the way up along your arm to your hand. And can you feel how that pathway kind of gets a little longer and a little flatter, a little more lengthened out as you go? And then could you lift your left hand to roll the ball back along that pathway to your shoulder blade, and then back down to your left hand. So now you're rolling it just along that left arm from your hand to your shoulder blade and back down to your hand. So how do you make these little adjustments in all of you to let that rolling happen? As your arm lifts a little bit to take the ball to your shoulder blade, and then lowers again to take the ball back down to your hand. Your hand needs to kind of lengthen a little bit to let that happen. Okay. Looks like you could do with a rest again. So just whatever position you'd like to rest in, just take a little break. And just feel how you're resting into the floor in whatever position you've chosen. And you still have a sense of that pathway that you've made along that diagonal. And if any parts of you, if you're uncomfortable anywhere, just notice that and see how you might be able to look after yourself to continue, maybe taking rests more often or changing position, whatever you need to do. So now, come back onto your tummies again. And this time, can you turn your head towards so that you're facing towards the right? Your left arm is extended in front of you. And can you think of this pathway again, this track that you've made along the back of yourself on a diagonal? And start with the ball on your right heel. Just lift that right leg a little to allow that imaginary heavy ball to roll up to your knee, up to your right hip, across and up along the length of your trunk to your left shoulder blade and all the way to your left hand, and then back down along that same diagonal. Can you lift your left arm to send the ball back again? So you're going to lift. So it's like you've got this long diagonal arc now. And so when the ball is on your hand, you're going to lift that left arm to take it all the way down across and to your right leg. And then when the ball gets to your right heel, you're going to lift your right leg and send the ball all the way back up along that pathway to your left hand. So you're getting this alternating, lifting your right leg, letting it down, lifting your right hand and arm and letting it down. And how, that's it. What do you notice in your ribs, your sternum, your belly, your spine? You feel that all the parts of you are needing to adjust and soften to allow yourself to roll that ball along the pathway there. So pause for a moment. And now, if that's okay for you, could you lift your left arm and your right leg at the same time? It doesn't need to be a big lift, just a little tiny lift away from the floor. And that's it. Can you do that and still breathe? That's it. So, and give yourself lots of rest here, okay? You don't need to hold it up for a long time. But the idea is that you've got this long curved arc from your left hand through to your right heel, and that you could lift your leg a little higher, your heel a little higher to roll the ball up towards your left hand as your left hand goes down. And then you can lift your left hand to roll the ball back again as your leg comes down, but they both stay up. So it's like rolling through this. If you had a wheel, for example, that you're rolling as one end comes up, the other end goes down, and then you roll the other way again. And of course, a wheel's going to roll more easily if it's smooth. So how do you get this smooth transition through the front of you in the contact with the ground to allow this rolling from one end to the other end? And what happens with your head? Is it heavy or light? And let that go. And now, rather than resting on the floor, can you come up for a moment? Notice how you come up from the floor. And just come up and see, what does that feel like to have done this along one diagonal? Do you still have a sense of that pathway at the back of you? Does it feel, do you notice anything at the front of you? And is it a relief to be up from the floor? Some of you it is. And just see if you shift your weight onto one leg and onto the other leg. Do you feel that you're getting taller on one side? Does your head feel lighter on one side than the other? Do you have any sense of difference between those two sides, between the side that you've been rolling this ball along and the other side? And go for a little walk, just a short one, to see what you notice about your walking. At what point in your walk do you notice a difference between the right leg and the left leg, between your right and your left arms, across the back of your trunk? Is there any sense of that pathway that we've been following? Yes? Yes? And then, all right, now you can lie down again. We're going to do the other diagonal, but much faster. Now you've got the idea of it. Is anyone not feeling a difference there? No, everybody's got something going on. Good. You went to sleep? Oh, well, that's fine. Now you're going to get a lovely diagonal on the other side. So come down, arrange yourself. So this time with your right arm lengthened and your head turned towards the left. So your face turned towards the left. And just feel now your left heel. And imagine, just start off finding this pathway from your left heel up to your left knee, up to your left hip. Whatever works for you. The pressure of somebody's fingers seeking out this pathway along the back of your lower leg to your knee and then up to your hip, or a heavy ball or a little steamroller, pressing along that path, finding the line of the bone, the line of support there. Almost kind of, you might imagine a rolling pin just kind of rolling into the dough. But there's a bone in there, and that's what we're looking for. And once you get to your left hip, continue over the back of your pelvis and up your spine, across and up your trunk towards your right shoulder blade now. And then can you track from your right shoulder blade up to your right elbow and up to the right hand. And continue to follow this track, to follow this pathway, trying to make it clearer each time, from your right hand all the way down to your left heel and back again. And each point along that pathway, feeling that downwards gentle pressure towards the floor. And where is it the most clear? And where is it the least clear? As you track along, sensing the back of you, but also the front of you as it gets pressed into the floor. along that track. And is this diagonal as easy to find as the other diagonal, or is it easier? And then you can start to alternate lifting your left heel, your left leg, to roll the ball up towards your left hip and across your pelvis, across the back of your trunk, feeling how your ribs adjust, your spine adjusts, across towards that right shoulder blade. As the right shoulder blade is pressed down into the floor, continue along your right arm to your elbow and to your hand. Let your leg rest, and then start to lift your right hand and arm to roll the ball back towards your right shoulder blade, and then continue rolling it across and down, following that pathway across the back of your trunk towards your left hip and down to your left knee, to your left heel. So your left leg would be lengthened and flattened, and then up again along that pathway. Each time getting clearer about where the pathway is and how that weight rolling along that track can press you longer and flatter into the floor along that path. And as your leg lifts, can you feel where you can support your weight to let that leg be light? And as your arm lifts, can you feel how you can support your weight, the weight of your arm, for it to be light? And what happens with your head? Do you have it glued onto the floor? Can it move? Maybe it's starting to feel light enough that it could lift a little. Have a rest again. Just let your leg down and rest on your tummy if you're okay with that. And then you could imagine lifting your leg and your arm at the same time. So just imagine that for starters. And that you could make this long, smooth arc that would allow the ball to roll all the way from your left heel through to your right hand. And when you're ready, you can actually do that. And feel how, as you lift a part of you, your weight rolls to another part of you. So you're finding this line of support across the floor between your arm and your leg. So your arm lifts a little more and your leg goes lower to the floor, then your leg lifts a little more and your arm goes lower to the floor. That's it, sensing how you can roll across the front of yourself. And what's happening with your head? How can you be comfortable here? Okay, let your arm and your leg down for a moment and imagine the ball in the small of your back now. It's in the lowest part of that curve. And can you then lift your arm and your leg, again, your left leg, right arm, in that long curve. Feldenkrais calls it a trough. And start to do that gentle rocking between your arm and your leg along that diagonal to move the ball a little further up and then a little further down, and gradually increase the trajectory of that ball. So it goes a little further towards your ribs, a little lower towards your pelvis, and then a little further up, a little lower down, until gradually you're rolling it all the way from your heel to your hand. And then let that go. And come up to stand again. And how easy is it to come up from the floor? That's it. And just see, as you're standing now, what do you notice this time? Do you have another diagonal here now? Does it feel... Well, what do you sense of those two pathways that you've made there along the back of you, and what you sense in the rest of you in response to that? And walk around a little bit. And just feel, what's the connection between your left heel and your right hand, your left hip, back of your left hip and the back of your right shoulder blade. And then come back to the floor. We've got one more little bit to do. So we've got two diagonals. That's a good start. We've got one more little pathway to find. So this time, when you lie down, see if you can rest your head in the middle on your chin. So we've done a lot of this lengthening out into extension. See if your chin can find a way to come to the floor and have your arms long. Well, no, they don't have to. Well, they can be wherever they're comfortable. See what works for you. And this time, can you imagine this heavy ball or this little steamroller in the curve of your neck in the middle here? And could you lift your head a little bit in such a way that you could roll that ball down along the middle of your spine between your two shoulder blades, and then let your head come down again? So how can you do that in a way that feels that your head is light enough to do that? Where do you get contact with the floor to let your head come up without pressing into your arms? That's it. You feel a little response in your legs, in your belly, lengthening through the front of you to allow this to happen. That's it. And then down again. And then the next time you do this, you can make that ball go a little further down so that you're rolling down the center of your spine to your lower back. So something needs to flatten at the lower end of you to let the ball come down to your lower back. And then to roll the ball up again, what can you do in your pelvis and your buttocks to roll the ball back again to your neck? And so how do you know that it's going down the middle of you? So continue to do this softly and gently, but really with that sense of weight pressing down. Can you feel at the front of you as you do that, as your head lifts a little more, that your sternum can lift a little bit, peel away from the floor a little? And does it feel like the weight is in the middle of your sternum, or a little bit to the right, or a little bit to the left? That's it. And you're just rolling it along that central line, the line of your spine. Okay. Now, the next time the ball is down in your lower back, see what it would be like to actually lift your legs, both legs, if it's possible, to roll the ball back towards your neck. This is a different way of rolling it back. So your neck and your head need to come down, and then your legs come down and your head comes up. That's it. And really have this sense of length. If you shorten while you're doing this, it'll be uncomfortable. So you want this long, long arc. And then let your legs down and do it the way you did it before, where your legs were not lifting. And rolling the ball from the curve of your neck down to the curve of your lumbar spine. Whichever way you prefer, whether that's lifting your legs or letting your legs down and lifting your pelvis. That's it. Okay. So rest there just for a moment. And then can you place that imaginary heavy ball in the small of your back, and by whatever means is most effective for you, can you gradually roll it a little bit up and a little bit down along this central line? A little bit up and a little bit down. Feeling how do you stay long at the front of you to really give yourself enough support on the floor to do that. And then next time that ball is in the small of your back, rest for a moment with it there. And could you lift your right leg and your left arm? And could you roll the ball along that diagonal from your lower back, gradually up towards your left shoulder blade and your left hand, and then down towards your right hip and your right leg. So you're lifting and lowering along that diagonal. And how does that feel now? And what does your head do? Are you finding that your head's light enough to come along with that, or are you needing to rest it on the floor? And the next time that ball's in the small of your back, rest again. And could you think of the other diagonal between your left leg and your right arm? And could you start to roll the ball along that diagonal by lifting that arm and leg and alternating, getting longer each time, clearer into the floor. That's it. And let it go. And rest there for a moment. Feel how your pressure map is at the front of you now on the floor, if you're still on your tummy. Just notice, is there More of you touching the floor or less will depend whether you're on your back or your front, I guess. If you're on your tummy, what's the distribution of pressure here? And then see what it's like to come up once more for the last time. How do you lift your head? How do you lift the weight of yourself up away from the floor? And see what it's like now. And what are you noticing? A few signals going on. Can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you feel how you stack up over your feet? Sense of your pelvis, your long line of your spine, your head on the top. And if you shift your weight to one leg and to the other leg, how do you sense that connection from the ground connecting through? And if you start to walk, feel what it's like as one leg goes forwards and the other is back. Can you feel that lengthening diagonal across the back of you? And do you get a sense of what that connection to the floor has done? Do you feel lighter or heavier? And go a little faster. How is it to speed up your walking now? How would it be to walk backwards? And that's the end of the lesson. You can have a little break, and then we're going to come and do a bit of practice on the floor. So maybe just a what do we say? Water in, water out break. We'll come back in optimistically 5 minutes.